Yep. Give me a nod when you're ready.
Like
Shooters ready. Stand by.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Bolts and Bourbon. I am joined by my co-host Matt Gunlock, and today our guest is Dave Riddle. Dave is the host of Casual Shooters podcast. He comes out with content every week, talking to shooters mostly from the USPSA discipline, but all across the practical shooting sports. Dave got his introduction to the Marine Corps through his dad. His dad was part of the Marine Corps shooting team. That's kind of what he grew up with. He grew up with high-power rifle, and Dave himself was a summer shooter during his career as a recon Marine. So we have plenty of things to talk about between his time in the Marine Corps and his podcast and his interaction with the practical shooting sports. But I would just like to say, Dave, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it.
So, Frank kind of already hinted at it, but you grew up in a Marine family with your father serving as a coach on the Marine Corps rifle team. How did that influence your decision to eventually join and become a Marine and go to the recon community?
Well, they're somewhat mutually exclusive in that I had been around them since I was little. My first paying gig was Quantico Shooting Club. What year was that? I'm gonna guess 78 time frame. I was a runner out there, meaning I took the scorecards from during the high power matches. At the end of each course of fire, they would put all the scorecards up in the middle, and I would take them and then run them down up around the 600 and down to the where the old pistol range was. And they had a trailer down there. They had like 3 or 4 women, and they'd all be crunching numbers. This huge dry erase board, like it was probably 8 feet long, and it had just lines, and the course of fire was up there. So they would have every competitor's name, and they would add in the score they had at each yard line for whatever course of fire it was, and then a total at the end, so people could go down there and it was the old internet. That's how they watched the scores. Wow. It was practice score. But so obviously that was my taste. So growing up, I mean, that's what I thought the Marine Corps was. There were a couple of guys. I can't remember the one guy's name, Randy something. He used to call me Pink Hair Boy. And him and Scarborough, there was the only two no, not Scarborough. It was Roxborough. Told me that what you see out here isn't the Marine Corps. Well, I didn't listen to him. I was going in, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was thinking Intel, S2 type stuff. And I had a color vision defect. So that was out. I had a Navy recruiter come to my high school with my name on his list, called me out of class down to the counselor's office. And I was like, oh my God, what I do now? I'm in trouble. I didn't know it was a Navy recruiter. And he's like, hey, we want to recruit you for the nuclear program. I was a junior, and I was like, he's like, first off, they were offering a $20,000 sign-on bonus.
Holy shit. That's a lot of money.
It was a shit ton of money. And you guys good with language?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. It was a shit ton of money, especially back then. But the next thought in my mind was that uniform. And I'm like, I can't wear that uniform. I just can't do it. Not that white Cracker Jack uniform. So that was out. So I was like, I knew I was joining the Marines. And when I went and talked to the recruiter, he was actually a reconnaissance Marine. So I believe he had jump wings and a scuba bubble. He may not have had the scuba bubble, may have just been wings. But either way, we were doing cool stuff like rope bridges and other things during our delayed entry. And I was like, yeah, I'm definitely doing that. And he's like, well, I can't guarantee you that. All you can do is sign up, and then you have to take the NDOC test when you get to ITS. So I was like, okay, I'm in. No, I signed. So I became an 0311, and that's what it was. Of course, my dad was like, what? He thought it was the dumbest thing ever. He's like, look, I can teach you how to camouflage. We'll go out here in the backyard. I'll teach you how to do it. He's like, you should go in and learn a skill. I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do. My mom was livid. My dad actually said, Becky, shut up. He never said that. I was like, oh boy, it's getting heated in here. So they were kind of mutually exclusive. I saw one side and it looked like fun, but those two were right. It wasn't completely different than what the real Marine Corps was.
Do you regret not going in and getting a skill, or are you happy with the route that you actually chose?
I'm very happy with with the route that I chose. I just would have gotten out a little differently. That's all.
So how long were you in recon for, and where were you stationed? What's some good memories that you had from that community?
Oh man, as I was reminiscing, I've got a lot. Here's the funny thing about stories. When I was in, I was like, I don't have any stories. I got nothing. And then I get out and I look back, I'm like, oh, this, that, and the other, all kinds of stories. And, so oddly enough, went to ITS, took the NDOC, got selected. Again, a shit ton of us got selected. It was over a dozen, I don't know, maybe 15, 18 of us got selected. The problem was we started ITS in October and we finished in December. So it's like mid-December we finished, and ARS, which is Amphibious Reconnaissance School, that's what it was called at the time, all of the cadre was off until mid-January. So they were like, we can't send you to ARS because there's nobody there, and they're not going to send you there for a month with nothing to do.
So they kept you in a holding platoon. No?
They shipped us out. They sent a bunch of us, like a dozen of us, to Okinawa, 3rd Recon. They sent so many of us to Oki that they put a special, RIP program, Recon Indoctrination Program, school together, 38 days nonstop. We did 28 days. So this is like May timeframe of the following year. So this would be May of 86, where the intel guy was a Vietnam vet, and they had some other people that were war veterans. The colonel in charge, I don't remember his name. He was a dark green Marine. Because back then you were either dark green or light green. There were only 2 shades of green. It wasn't white, black, or anything else. He had made a name for himself. I think as a lieutenant, he had captured some big Russian artillery piece or North Vietnamese artillery piece in Vietnam. So anyway, they put this thing together. We spent 28 days up in northern training area doing patrols, learning how to write patrol orders, doing all of that. Then we came back. We had 4 hours from the time we got back to Schwab to try to wash whatever we can. And then we started 10 days of waterworks where we were just out doing nothing but boat stuff for the next 10 days. So it was nonstop, 38 days. So that's how my time started. So that's how we earned the MOS. That was the only way we could. But again, there was like 12 of us, but apparently there were some other people that needed to go through as well that got there before us or something. It was really weird. So we ended up having like 18, 20 people. And it's first time as an adult, I experienced an earthquake sitting in a GP tent in northern training area in one of those little tiny kiddie desks, and it started shaking, and I'm like, who's kicking my chair? And then I realized there's nobody behind me. I'm like, oh shit, it's an earthquake. I saw a Habu mongoose fight in Okinawa.
Hell yeah.
That was cool. Man, that mongoose tore that Habu up. That was ugly. The darkest of any place I've ever been was Northern Training Area. We were doing a patrol. This was not during RIP. It was back when we were with our platoon. I can't remember that sergeant's name now. He went to Bridgeport, but he loved snakes. He ended up taking snakes from Korea or Japan back. He flew with snakes in a sack around his neck. And they were pit vipers. But he ended up apparently at Bridgeport, he got bit in the face several times by a snake. And apparently he died a couple times en route to the hospital. Good guy, though. Just, well, I don't know what his fascination was with snakes. Yeah. But holy cow, man. I'll never forget. My eyes had to be as big as my glasses because I literally couldn't see a thing. And you had to hang on to the pack in front of you or you just lost track. I don't know how the point man was able to make his way through there. I've never been in an area so dark in my life. Well, we got to go to the Philippines 3 times. Got to go to Korea 3 times. So that's how I know about Mud Chuck.
Hate those places.
Team Spunk or Team Spirit. We used to call it Team Spunk. It was I did. Or is it you guys I was talking? I don't think it was. We had a guy in our platoon, got assigned to our team as our communicator that had to take testosterone. I was like, what? They let him in the Marine Corps? He literally had to take testosterone or he had so much estrogen, he literally grew breasts. We were in Team Spirit one year and this dude fell off a patty dike face first right into the shit water. And we were all like, oh my God. But we were at the same time, we were like, hey, he's out of our team now. We don't have to deal with him. We just shuffled our gear around, but he got injured. So it was during a massive exercise. So we basically had to turn ourselves in and say, hey, we had to walk into enemy lines because we had this injured dude with us. So we had this guy named Brian Pennington. And he and I both went to ITS together and then went to Okie. We ended up in the same platoon, Bravo 2. Bravo 1 was DRP, Deep Reconnaissance Platoon. There was no third force at the time. And we ended up in the same team together. And we were all huddled together and we're like, we didn't get captured. We had to come in and bring our injured guy in. So we're like, what the hell is going on? So we decided we were going to pop our red day-night flares. Man, did we piss some people off with that. Holy cow. Because we ruined their entire assault. Because you can't, once you pop that red side of that flare, man, those things do not come out. Those guys were trying to stomp it into the mud hole and it just, they just kept burning. So a lot of good. That's also where, have you ever fast roped out of a CH-53?
I have
or
not.
Repelled? I'm sorry. Repelled out of one?
No.
I do not recommend it. First guy out. So I was the team leader at the time. I go out first. I'm like, I'll go out first. So I jump out. And we were up.
You're just kind of flailing in the wind, aren't you?
Oh my God. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was getting. If I knew what I was getting myself into, someone else would have gone first.
Somebody bigger and heavier.
Yeah, that I could land on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I went out and immediately I was like, oh my God, I'm moving fast. So I try to brake. The rope burns through my blouse right to my skin and I can't stop. And then I hit like a turtle right on my back. Bam! Got the wind knocked out of me. I was like, "Hoo!" And all I see is the next dude coming out of the helicopter. I'm like, God damn, I got to get up. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get up or this dude was going to land on me. So I had to belay for him. That was Gosky. And so I've got a lot more stories than I thought I did. I mean, we could take 4 hours talking about stories, but so then I go to 2nd Recon. I spent 2 years in Okie. I extended for a year because I enjoyed it so much. And then I went to second for 3 years. Well, before I get out of the Okie thing, though, because we're talking marksmanship, that was probably my proudest marksmanship time, because my second year there, so 87, we go to the range and we shoot Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I'm like, I'm going to declare early. I'm going to get this done. Man, we walk out of the barracks the next morning and it is like a monsoon. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm like, well, I've already declared I'm doing it. So I was the high shooter for the entire company with a 237 in monsoon rains.
Hell yeah.
I was very proud of that moment.
Yeah, that's something to be proud of. I mean, not
Yeah.
many people can have the mental fortitude to keep going through something like that.
I was very happy. So then I go to second in 88. I got there in January of 88, took some time from December to January, took some time off. I got to play with thermal imagers first guys to start playing with thermal imagers handheld. We took it to the island of Viegas, $45,000 piece of equipment. I waterproofed my camera, and I gave the thermal imager to another guy on my team. I'm like, look, we need to waterproof this, because we were doing an amphibious operation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our boat was so heavy that we had like 1.5 feet of water. We had about 15 to 18 inches of water in the back of the boat, which is where my camera was and the thermal imager. Well, my camera came out of it dry, but the thermal imager died. So we ruined a $45,000 piece of equipment. I was like, oh my God, never heard a word about it. Nobody said anything. They probably were like, well, I guess we need to make this better. So that's how that's how second recon started for me. I got to go to jump school from there, Pathfinder, then jump school. We went on a med float. We went to New York for
Fleet Week.
The hostage training.
Oh, that's
IHR.
Cool.
Yeah.
We don't do anything like that now, but that's pretty cool.
No, that was pretty cool.
I don't know if Recon still does that, but I mean, I haven't heard anything like that.
We went up there. We were housed with Second Force. There was a SEAL element. They were up there in the same barracks. That's where I got in a yelling match with a colonel who's a pilot of I don't remember if it was a 46 or what. But
That's all right. Pilots aren't real officers anyway.
I'm surprised no one said anything to me, because we were literally both standing up, like yelling at each other. I was a corporal at the time.
I mean,
So
he probably just put on his leather bomber and smoked a cigar afterwards, and then went back to an environment where everyone calls him by first name or a call sign. So,
Man, there was one night we stayed out at the Suffolk County Airport, and there was one night we were coming back from Kingstown, which is north of the city. So we had to drive back, and we were driving the SEAL stuff back. I'm driving a station wagon with like 2,000 pounds of explosives in it. And we get back, and one of the guys driving the other vehicle was, did you know that light was red? I'm like, what red light? So tired, I didn't even see the light. I'm just driving. We're just zoned out. I'm like, great. We're running red lights with 2,000 pounds of explosives in the back of the car.
It'll buff
Holy
out.
cow. Oh, Lord. And so then what did we do? Went on med float. Then it was pretty cool. We came back. We went to Key West for sub ops. We went to Camp Dawson, which is an SF. It's actually a Delta training compound in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the worst experience jumping out of an airplane in my life. I don't remember the other guy's name, but he was a short dude. He probably just barely made. He's probably like 5'3", 5'4". And the LZ was it was horrible. Like, you would never select an LZ like this, because there were trees about 3 to 4 feet tall, a lot of shrubs, a lot of tree trunks from trees they'd cut down. But this dude, he goes out in a stick before me. So we're coming around, jump out. I see the LZ. I'm coming down, and those parachutes are okay, but back in the 80s, they weren't the greatest. So, I'm trying to turn this thing, and I'm trying to guide it. and this dude's being drug across this LZ. It's not even that big, but he's being drug across. I'm like, and I'm trying to turn and get away from him, can't get away from him. Feet get caught up in his chute. So his chute collapses, but it wraps around my feet. So now I'm at a 45-degree angle and just like a piece of plywood, bam, right into the ground. He's like, thanks, Dave. I'm like, F you, man. I was hurting. So let's see. So then after that, that's when we went to Bridgeport. So we go from Key West in the fall and Camp Dawson in the fall to Bridgeport in the winter. Then we go to Wisconsin. Bridgeport, we had a 35 degrees below zero whiteout night march with snowshoes.
Yeah, fuck that.
Man, if it wasn't for the snowcats with their lights on, holy cow, that's all I remember, the bright lights of the snowcat and just snow moving horizontally. It was nuts, but that was a good time. That was a really good time. Then we went to Wisconsin. That sucked. There was no snow. It was just blah. Came back, went to Eastern Division matches. I went to Western Division matches in 86. So Eastern in 90, got selected to come up to the team, shot that summer. Then actually re-enlisted. I got recruited to be a sniper instructor, actually. So re-enlisted to go to school and go up there.
So you have a broad range of skills between reconnaissance community, being a sniper instructor, being on the shooting team. Have your skills that you attained before you came in the Marine Corps, working with your dad, learning how to shoot, being on the team. Did you ever meld those skills together with did you ever use your shooting background in order to help yourself and help others in terms of lethality and survivability, in the Marine Corps?
I'll say the only time it really happened was whenever we would have to go to the qual range. Unfortunately, I was always like the high shooter guy. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't anybody to really help me or that we could talk and bounce things off of. But before we'd go to the range, we would always do, I say the range, before every yearly qual, we would go out and do some snap-in dry fire time. And that's where I would actually work with the other guys, especially the marksman guys who need a little bit more help to get them up a little bit higher. But I never really had the chance. And I don't know if we talked about this or I was talking about it with someone else, but this story seemed to be coming up a bunch lately where right before we went on our med float, we couldn't get ammo to BZO our guns. So we had to buy it out in town, then go, the lieutenant locked in a range for us. We BZO'd and did a few fire maneuver type things. And so we never got real live fire time.
So, you spent some time in the Marine Corps. What was it like when you finally decided that you were going to be staying in or leaving? And what was the transition into civilian life like back then?
Well, there was no internet. That's for sure. It would have been nice. It would have been nice if Al Gore would have invented that about 10 years earlier. That son of a bitch.
Well, it's I know, it wasn't until the late 90s when General Gray was the commandant that he introduced the transition readiness seminar for Marines. So back then they really didn't have much of anything to offer you guys.
And that's where my mistake was. So, I was at the sniper school. I loved it. That's probably the best assignment I've ever had in my entire life. That was the most fun I've had. I got to do a bunch of things there that I would have never been able to do, and meet people I never would have met. But Clinton coming into office, the drawdown, the sensitivity training, all the nonsense with that. They even sent Special Forces Green Beret down to the school to basically make assessments of all of us instructors. And that's
And assessments and was it to maybe poach you guys or to just say these are good, keep them?
threat assessment.
Ah,
As a threat assessment when Clinton came into office.
oh wow.
Yeah. So our gunny, John Sten at the time, basically told him to fuck off and get the fuck out of our school. So he kicked them out, but that's what they were there for. So we were having to go through sensitivity training. That pissed me off. And then that guy comes down. So it just kind of got squirrely when Clinton got into office. So I was done at that point. But because it was more of an emotional decision, plus I was also, there was a couple other things. You know, my then wife, now my ex-wife, wanted to have kids. And I was like, well, based on what I do, I will never be home. And I remembered being, you know, my dad, his slow time was like October to March. So I was in school when he had free time. And then about the time division matches started up, the team was, because he was full-time assigned at Quantico. That's when their busy time started going. So when I was out of school, he's working, 12-hour days. So I was like, dude, I really want to, try to raise kids in that type of an environment. You had the thing with the military going on at the time. So at that point, I was like, 9.5 years, I've got to make a decision. I'm either staying in for 20 or I'm getting out. This is my make or break time. And they had, I don't even know how they do this, but they had orders cut for me for January of 1995. And my EAS date was December 11th of 1994. So I'm like, how do I have orders when that's beyond my contract? Mm-hmm. So that was another reason I'm like, I'm getting out. You guys don't even know what you're doing. But I really didn't have a plan. I was like, I'll make it work. So the transition was rough.
Would you end up finding yourself doing whenever you got out?
Well, I did a part-time job for about 6 months, selling cars at Coles Ford in Woodbridge. And then a guy who I had been talking to a guy because was it April? Yeah, I want to say April. We had a basic class go from April to June. And right before that, I'd gone to Texas to help teach a class with an SF guy from 10th Mountain. And he was actually in Mogadishu. So we went down there to help put this class together. We taught this class. And I ended up going down to Houston and working with this guy for a couple of years. Designed a stock for a rifle, put a rifle together. And then we had a falling out and I just came back up to Virginia. Yeah, actually, we were joined by Kyle Bittner, who was also an instructor at Quantico, but he joined me down there later and left before me, and then I came back.
So, you kind of got your introduction into the shooting sports from high power, and most people that get introduced to that from a young age tend to stick with that. But you eventually found action shooting. One, how did you find action shooting? And two, what was that transition like going from predominantly shooting high power to, now all you do is shoot action?
Well, I took a long break in between because I was, even at the sniper school, I was trying to still do competition. I was the only instructor that I know of that actually went and shot 1,000-yard match with my assigned sniper rifle. I won my class, even with my first shot going the wrong way on the fine tune on the inertial scope. I dropped an 8 out the bottom instead of moving my impact up, because I turned and said, I'm shooting for record. He said, okay. So I made my adjustment on my scope, loaded, first shot, bang, 6 o'clock out the bottom, an 8. I was like, son of a bitch. I still won my class, but I'd go in on weekends because we used to be able to go in our cage and pull guns whenever. So I'd go on a Saturday, set up a target on range 4, go out to the 300-yard line and just shoot a couple boxes of ammunition. So once I got out, I had a long break until my kids got older, and I was able to start doing it again. And I found out how expensive it is. Like, this is crazy. Who can do this? Who can afford this? And just by happenstance, I don't even remember how I found it, but I saw a video about action shooting. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, there's no way I could have done NRA style bullseye pistol shooting. It's just not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bianchi looks pretty cool. I could do that because you got, sliding targets and some other stuff. I'm not all about, spending $5,000 to put wings on a gun and all of that, but it still looks like some fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw that action shooting. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Much cheaper, much easier, less equipment. So I was like, let's do this. And I still find myself at times trying to dress up my sights with the dot. Even with the dot, I'm like, oh, it's got to be exactly right there. It's taken me a long time to understand that, no, there's an acceptable accuracy versus, pinpoint. It's got to be a certain spot.
Yeah, that's one thing. That's what I try and tell Marines, like, especially coming off rifle range, or even like a lot of the high power guys, or whenever the precision pistol guys, it's like, hey, 2 shots on, like, 3 gunners, 2 shots on paper, or USPSA, practical accuracy, go for the A zone. Like, don't dress it up, don't waste time, just get the shots in there. Trust your sights.
That's a hard transition, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was for me, because you have to understand that's what I was around since I was about 10, all the way up to 52.
Mm-hmm.
42 years of dress it up, dress it up, dress it up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
do you find yourself still having trouble with that sometimes?
Can I plead the fifth on this one?
Yes, you may.
Well, I think you know the answer then.
So what's one thing that's kind of surprised you about starting and continuing a podcast for as long as you have? Me and Frank, we kind of, I started this and brought Frank on, and there's a lot of, one of the things that surprises me all the time is I'll go to a match not even thinking, oh, I have a podcast, and people will just come up to me and be like, hey, it's fine, it's nice to meet you, keep doing what you're doing, I love your podcast. And like, every time that surprises me, and it's a really cool experience. Like, some people are like, oh, you're famous. No, I'm not, leave me alone, I don't want to be famous. I just want to be me.
Yeah, those are fun moments. So yeah, I get that. We started this with 3 of us. I was like, look, we're doing it at nationals when we go. They're like, okay, but they have since fallen off the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest thing is I don't have any media training. I talk to people every day in my day job as a paramedic. So I'm used to doing that and asking all the personal questions that I want to ask. But I think similar to you is that, I've been able to refine it a little bit, and then you finally start. It's hard to get feedback via the internet,
mm-hmm.
but when you get the feedback in person, it's like, okay, it's nice.
Yep.
That, people do listen and they do like it. And, I'll get an occasional question about something. And then when we're done having the conversation, you're like, man, I've been listening for a long time. Thanks. You're doing a great job. It's like, whoa, okay. It just kind of motivates you to keep it going,
Well, I have like certain people that'll always hit me up like after an episode, and they're like, dude, you killed it. Like, a friend of mine, Noah, he's like, dude, that was a great episode. And I know if he didn't hit me up, I guess one way of taking it is like, well, it could have been better here. A friend of mine, George Dorbert, he's always hitting me up, dude, that was awesome. Love what you guys put out. And I've known George for years, and like I'll accept his criticism any day.
Yeah, those are nice to have.
But putting out as many episodes as you do, Dave, and we're a weekly podcast. But just by virtue of the sheer quantity of episodes that you put out, sometimes you get episodes that are a little more inspired. Sometimes you develop a better rapport with the person that you're interviewing, and sometimes you catch a side of people that sometimes they weren't really aware of, and you get some candid and sometimes emotional conversations. So, out of all the people that you've talked to and all the interviews that you've conducted, what are some ones that stick out to you and why?
The first time I spoke with Nils Jonassen, we did the hour-long interview, talking, and then I stopped the recording, and he stayed and talked to me for another 2 hours. We talked about training, just shooting in general, just life in general, and I was like, that's the first time I was kind of surprised that somebody at that level was willing to just sit down and talk and not
give you the time of day.
Yeah. I mean, and for 2 hours, I was like, man, there were aspects of it. I was like, I wish I had just kept recording it.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty amazing because he was, giving me tips and, oh, if you're having problems with that, try this. I'm like, okay. And I asked him, I'm like, have you thought about getting into teaching? He's like, no, I can't do that. I'm no good at that. But there was not last year, I had Jesse Morrow on. And we both talked about some experiences in our past that I ended up messaging her. I'm like, look, I'm cutting that out. I'm not comfortable putting that conversation out on the internet. So every now and then you just, you run across that person, even Robert Vogel, that was just very down to earth. I'm like, I was kind of surprised, but I guess in general, I'm just surprised at how willing people are to come on and talk about anything and everything with shooting. We all share that same passion, but I still didn't expect it for them to be that open.
Mm-hmm.
So that just surprises me.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is a testament, and I've listened to a decent amount of your episodes, Dave. Your own ability as an interviewer, your ability to make people feel comfortable and just make it feel like a conversation. Matt and I, we've done some episodes might feel a little more, formal, and sometimes you interview someone who's a little more stiff. But sometimes you do develop a rapport, and it just like you said, you keep talking to Nils 2 hours after you guys are done recording, and it's like you guys are old friends. It's really a fun part of what we do is that we get to do that on a weekly basis.
The Williams sisters, I feel like they're my nieces at this point. We see each other, we're like, it's like crazy. It's crazy the relationships you build.
Yeah, absolutely. So specifically about USPSA, you've been very active this last election cycle. You've been putting out a lot of information. You hosted an episode in which you interviewed all the candidates for USPSA president. Always putting up graphics, reminding people. And as of yesterday, right? Today is the 17th. Yesterday is the 16th. The elections have officially closed. So it's been good because I think there's been really a dearth of reliable information sources within USPSA. I think that they're not really doing all they can in terms of social media and outreach. It's really kind of an afterthought. And it's refreshing to have someone step up with consistency and transparency as you have. Having been around the sport for a while, what do you see as different about this election cycle compared to past election cycles?
So when I first came in, it wasn't that long ago, it was only 5 years ago. I didn't know anything, about who was what or anything. I didn't know area directors. I didn't know anything. And then in 2019, Foley was running, I'm pretty sure it was 2019. Yeah. Foley was running for re-election. And there was a guy here in Area 8 that shot down near Richmond at Cavalier Rifle and Pistol, where I would shoot frequently. And so, I voted for the guy just because I knew who he was. I didn't know this other guy, Mike Foley. And so by the time the next presidential election came up, which was the one Yi Min Lin won, I was like, you know what? We should have a debate. We should have a way. And I didn't want to debate for the simple, for just so we can make these people get up in front of people and explain who and what they are. But it was more kind of like the podcast. Let's get them out in front of people so people can learn who they are. Instead of making it a popularity contest, why don't we make it like a legit election?
Mhm.
Let's get them out there. Let's ask questions that people want to know answers to, but at the same time, not be pointed and not like some of the things you would see on TV with podcasts and or not podcasts, but debates and media and all that. I'm like, let's make it fair across the board, give everybody the same questions and do that. So I think the difference is now I did it again this year. My plan is to continue now with all of the area director elections as well. And I think that is the difference. The difference is putting the people out there where people can find them, listen to them, and not just listen to them, but you can go on YouTube and see them as they're talking. It's a lot different when you can see the body language and their face and everything else. So I think that will change elections going forward because other people are starting to do it too now. So I think that's the biggest difference.
It did make a big difference for me, having listened to that episode, actually hearing directly from the candidates and kind of getting a glimpse into what they might be like in actual leadership positions. So that was really helpful for me in terms of my decision making. And I would say that this particular election cycle, right, like there's a lot of candidates out there. I mean, I haven't been in the sport that long, but there's a lot of people running for president. I think that level of participation has been driven by a lot of those other factors that you talked about. So your average local shooter might not care about this as much. They might care more about shutting out the noise, and they might tell people that they only care about local matches. But what would you say to that individual in terms of why it's important that they go out and vote?
Well, I think it all matters because, if all you're thinking about is your local match, well, whoever's in charge of the USPSA can affect your local match. If like the biggest thing people are worried about right now is the financial status of the organization. Mm-hmm. Yes, we all know that the USPSA could collapse, but on Saturday you could still go down to your local club and shoot a match. But it still throws some other things into doubt. Will there be level 2s here? What are we doing now? So there's still a lot of questions. So I don't understand why anybody who paid a membership doesn't vote, because you deserve that. You're kind of cheating yourself out of an opportunity to state your opinion on what you think is good for the organization. So why somebody wouldn't, do that, it confounds me. But I mean, that's also their right, so I'm not going to browbeat them. But at the same time, I'm like, but it does matter. So I just had that conversation with Randall Holes. Same thing, because he's like, yeah, I just want to shoot the matches and not deal with the politics. I get that. None of us want to deal with the politics. But I asked him, well, I said, I'm not asking who, but did you at least vote? And he goes, yeah, I voted. And I'm like, okay, well, good. At least you voted.
Yeah, that's what really matters. But yeah, just adding to that, you're right. Like how things are run at the organizational level absolutely do end up filtering down to the local match. Like they end up splintering divisions, the way the rule book is implemented. So yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. I will say that I think for a lot of people, the people that say that they don't really want to get into the politics, the weekend matches are an escape, as they are for a lot of us, right? They're what keep us going through the week, because we can't wait to get to the Saturday or the Sunday, get on the road and go shoot a match and be with our friends. I get that. But at the same time, right, if it's something that you care about and you're willing to spend an entire day of your weekend on, then you might as well take the time to be informed and vote for someone who's going to represent you for the future of the sport. Because if you enjoy it that much, then you want to keep doing it. So yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So did you end up covering Carry Optics Nationals?
So I did. I never got a media badge or anything. And to be fair, I did tear a meniscus in April. So I don't think I would have been able to go anyway. It was post-surgery, but I was still kind of gimping around at that point. But regardless, I never did get a media badge. I had reached out to Yemen. We were chatting about some stuff and told him about it. And Jake Martins emailed me and said, "Hey, Dave, what are you looking to do? Some things we may not be able to accommodate." I'm like, okay. So I just basically put out a wish list of these are the 8 or 9 items that I was looking to do, expecting like we can't accommodate that, but we can do this and this. And never heard back. So what I did anyway was I did a quick update. Like the end of day 1, I put out an episode, just me talking with some scores and what was going on. Then day 2, I expanded it based on, okay, now we're going into day 3. This is the section they're going into. They got a lot of big field courses. A lot of things can happen. This is your leaderboard. And then the last 2 hours of the match, I live streamed where I basically shared my practice score competitor app on the screen and talked about the scores as they were changing and what was going on and why it was changing and who was doing what. So people who didn't necessarily have access to that could listen in. So that's how I covered it.
Yeah. And that was really helpful because as Carry Optics Nationals was happening, I was on my way to Italy. So
okay.
aside from just refreshing scores and practice score, listening to your input, really your commentary. And really, I think that's what's missing in terms of USPSA and like professional sports, right? Professional sports have so much media coverage. There's pundits, there's people that are giving you context. So even if you don't really know the particulars of a sport, you can watch it in a casual manner and you can at least understand some of the context. And commentary adds to the gravity of the situation. It accentuates how much pressure there is on a particular, level of performance. So I think that's really helpful. But I guess my next question for you is, what do you think needs to adapt additionally in terms of the way information and presentation, the way information and presentation in the sport are handled in order to advance it further? And this is a question that we posed to Brian Conway, who's, he's been involved with the sport. He's pretty much at a major match every single weekend.
Yeah, supporting it.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I don't know if there's anybody more involved in the sport than him, unless you work for USPSA. But I think
Conley
exactly
for president.
There you go. Yeah,
I mean,
of America.
If you vote for Luigi, I think you're essentially voting for Brian.
Okay. I think more of getting the sport out there. Look, I think the videos that Josh Fralick puts out are amazing. The qualities, I mean,
agreed.
Out of 5 stars, it's a 7.
Yes, agreed.
But there's a huge gap with everything else because that's just little snippets here and there. It's not the actual competition. So like you were saying earlier, nobody hears, the drama going on stage by stage. Oh no, now so-and-so. And I go back to last year's women's super squad. Morgan Leonhardt is leading by like 10 points going at 10 or 15, somewhere between 10 and 15 points going into stage 3, has a miss. She's shooting into the sun, completely misses the target. Justine is able to overtake her on that last stage of the entire match and win, women's national champion in Carry Optics. You don't know what's going to happen. And if we're not talking about it, where everybody can hear. You can't grow the sport. The people need to know that drama. And it's funny because Brian Conley actually reached out to me. He called me. I was like, who's this person calling? But I answered my phone, and sure enough, it was him saying he listened to it. He listened to it after the fact on Monday, wherever he was driving to. He listened to the whole thing. It's like, man, that was fantastic. So going back to what Matt was saying earlier, that, it's nice getting that feedback, and I didn't expect it. But I think that's where the USPSA is missing out, because there's nobody trying to bring that drama out. And I think it might have even been Nick Walden. I had put out a survey back in like February.
Yeah, I remember that survey.
And I think he's the one who said, if it's not him, whoever it was, I apologize. He said something like a sports center type thing at the end of day 2. I was like, that's actually pretty genius.
Yeah.
So that's what I was trying to do with day 2, was kind of like a sports center style wrap up, and then a live thing on Saturday or Sunday. But I mean, we still have several nationals still to go. So it'd be nice if they could do something and start expanding that side of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the Sports Center analogy is quite apt. I will take it a step further, and I'm a huge NFL guy, and my preferred way to watch the games on Sunday morning is I'll have Red Zone up on one screen, and then I have my team, whatever, like one game I want to focus on another screen. And I think Red Zone is great for multiple reasons. If a team is close to scoring, it's automatically going to put that screen up. Sometimes Chris Hansen has as many as 4 screens up. And I think that makes sense, because at a Nationals format, we have 3 different zones, right? We have the Super Squad, which everyone's always going to watch the shooters there. But we have in the case of Carry Optics Nationals, the champion wasn't even on the Super Squad. Christian Seiler was in a completely different squad with the AMU guys, and he ended up taking it overall. So just spotlighting other shooters as well. So I mean, it's a great undertaking, and we would need to professionalize the way we handle media and practical shooting a whole lot. But I think it's something to aspire to. I think you'd agree with that as well. Yeah,
I mean, even Daji Zhang, top 10.
Yeah,
not on either Super Squad, but I mean, he was right there. So I was tracking him too. And then you had the whole, now JJ was on there, right, but that's a whole other drama thing that I added in, being able to follow. He just kept climbing the board. You're like, when's this guy going to stop? So there's so much that we could bring to the sport that we're not. And hopefully, I mean, over time it changes.
Yeah, I hope so as well. But yeah, always moving forward. But I mean, at this point, those are all the questions we had for you. Is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with? We appreciate you coming on and talking to us.
Does this go out on YouTube too?
It doesn't.
Okay. Well, never mind then. I was going to show the Habu Sake, saying this is what we talked about before, but I'm not going to.
For our listeners, it's a bottle of alcohol with a actual snake trapped inside of it.
A Habu snake, one of the most deadliest vipers in the world, that is prevalent in Okinawa, Japan.
Yeah,
there you go.
Absolutely.
Little floaties in there. No, that's all I had. I appreciate you guys having me on, though. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. For those of you that haven't listened to Casual Shooters podcast, Dave comes out with episodes weekly, sometimes more often than that. Very consistent, a lot of great content. So highly recommend that you go and check him out. But for our listeners, thanks for listening, and let us know how we're doing. Thanks.